Ladies and gentlemen, and Mr. Piper, how are you, sir?
I would, but
Welcome to the Macomb Township October 4th Planning Commission meeting. Would everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Tuckfield, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Spatafora. Here. Mr. Miley. Here. Mr. Tuckfield is present. Mr. Hardy.
Here.
Ms. Smith.
here,
Mr. Oliver.
Here.
And then Mr. Bentley is absent. I believe he had sent a note earlier this week.
He did.
Make a motion, Mr. Chair, to the extent we have any votes tonight that are roll call to exclude Secretary Bentley from all roll call votes tonight.
And I'll support that.
Motion by Mr. Spatafora to exclude Mr. Bentley from roll call votes, supported by Mr. Meyerly. All in favor?
I,
Anybody opposed? Okay. Approval of previous meeting minutes.
Or deletions, Mr. Chair, I'll move that we approved our previous meeting minutes as presented.
And I'll support.
Okay, motion by Mr. Spatafora and supported by Mr. Meyerly. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Approval of tonight's agenda. Any discussions?
Mr. Chairman, there's no corrections, deletions. I move we accept the agenda as presented.
Okay, motion by Mr. Oliver,
support,
supported by Mrs. Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. Old business. Mr. Box,
There is none this evening.
there is none. Okay. New business, public hearings, zoning ordinance workshop. Mr. Box.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. So let me start by saying I sent you some directions of which articles to review. Gave you at the last meeting packet of a majority of the ordinance. Obviously, we're aware there's a lot of work that needs to be done still. So I may have been a little too hasty in putting some of this on the agenda, as some internal folks are uncomfortable talking about some of this without further internal discussion. And I apologize for that, but we didn't want to cancel the meeting when we can start to look at some of this. That being, I think our goal for tonight, 6 articles that I pointed out in the email to go through those with the goal of it being relatively one-sided discussion. That we're here to listen to your comments, notes, and go from there and make revisions as necessary. And ultimately, we'll have a final draft for everyone to review. So I understand some of you may have some questions. To a certain extent, we'll try to answer them, but we're hoping for a one-sided discussion this evening with you guys giving us your comments and what you saw in those 6 articles. So I guess starting with, first of all, does anybody any questions or concerns with that approach? And Ben, did you have any other additions to that?
I mean, I just want to make it clear that this is a preliminary draft created by our consultant. We have not done internal review through legal yet at this time. So we're just looking for your input in terms of from a planning commission perspective of what challenges you may see from your seat. So we need to internally review this, building official with each other, and kind of vet this through and make sure that it's in final form that we want to present to you in the future. So this is not a comment that where we're saying this is the final draft, and based on your comments, we're then going to give you the final draft. This is like the first draft before we vet it fully internally. And so you're part of that process of vetting it too, because as a planning commission, you're going to see this. So that's really what we're looking at. I just want you to understand that for purposes of tonight. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, and Mr. Box, is probably you, just to make sure that I have a follow. You're not gonna interact with conversation at all. We're just gonna give comments to? Is that 100%? Is that generally true? Is that true?
Generally true, I would say.
And then just so I can know where it'd be appropriate for me to make comments or ask questions. Is this because of it being a first draft and we don't want to speak on things that are not done? Can I understand it just so I can make sure I'm not asking questions?
Yes, yes, because it's a first draft. We don't want to go too in depth with back and forth conversation until it's ready for a final draft.
Not something we want to put all the thoughts out on the table in public until there's more.
Correct.
Final draft there. Okay.
As far as when to make comments, I guess that's up to you guys as a planning commission of how you want to run through this. My thought was we would go article by article, and I don't know if you guys have individual comments, if we start with Article 1, your comments, your feedbacks. In particular, we're looking for items that, obviously if there's grammar or grammatical errors, but items that you feel don't make sense or items that certainly need to be defined, let us know so we can identify those things.
Where we start?
So okay, then I say Article 1. A lot of this is similar, very similar to the previous ordinance, but hopefully you all had time to go through Article 1. I know we went through it again internally, and we already have internal comments to add to it. So any thoughts, comments, concerns with Article 1, any terms that in there that aren't defined and need to be of that nature?
And just to clarify, are you looking for things that you would want to have defined in definitions further, or
Yes.
chat and comments?
Both.
Okay.
In the first chapter, almost every ordinance I work with has the standard language in there, sets the basis of allowing you to have a zoning ordinance. It sets the rule of it is interpreted in terms of. It's pretty standard basic language that give you the right to zone.
It doesn't go so deep that you cut yourself. Yeah.
Chairman, I did have one comment. I don't know if Scott Forey is here. It's all the way at the end, and I'll just say in advance, I mostly had read through the definition, so I had some comments that I might be later, but specifically in section 1.06, it's referring to the severability of existing PUDs. It says PUDs shall remain valid if construction is begun within 1 year and completed within 2 years of the effective date of this chapter. Is that, I guess, to phrase this not as a question, but a statement, I would just want to see and make sure that we're comfortable with that as a time. I don't know if that's boilerplate timing. If 1 year is sufficient at the point that we spent time and got a PUD approved, it would seem like maybe there should be a little bit more time available for a developer to finish something at the point that we've gone all the way through the process and we were comfortable that it was something that we wanted to move forward with. So that was the only comment that I had there.
That will be looked at for sure.
Anybody else with anything on Article 1? Hearing none, I'm going to move on to Article 3. Where's Article 2 definitions, as I said in my email, I think of the opinion that definitions is something that we want to expand and bulk up the ordinance or previous ordinance. But I think that's one of the last things we'll tackle because we're going to identify items to find as we go through this. So Article 3 being administration and enforcement. Are there questions, concerns, items that need to be defined?
Chairman, if I could through to Mr. Buck.
Go ahead.
I have not read through the performance guarantee, but is the early assumption that we are proceeding with the changes in bonds that have been changed when the new administration came in? Is that the general expectation? You know, there was a relatively substantial change, I guess about a year and a half ago. The general expectation?
To keep moving forward with what was changed about a year and a half ago. Yes, that is the intent. And that's one of the things, Mr. Van Tifflin pointed out to us internally the other day, that we have, the performance guarantee in this section, and it also appears in a later section. And there is some conflicts in there, so we're aware of that. And we'll be taking a look at that and correcting that.
Yeah, we'll be updating it to all the modern standards to make sure it flows.
But currently, the anticipation is we're not changing a third time, or we're planning on essentially going with what had been changed.
Correct.
Yes.
We also, I'll point this out too, notice several times in here, references to the zoning board of appeals, where sometimes it says zoning board of appeals, sometimes it says board of zoning appeals, and other the board of appeals. We're going to be consistent with zoning board of appeals.
I'd actually noticed that, and I believe it was like that in the old ordinance.
Correct.
That was that was the first thing I noticed, and I was like, man, we're changing it. And I went back, I was like, nope, that's the way it was. Also look back in the statute, it's referred to as zoning board of appeals in the enabling act as well, so.
Correct. Anybody, anything else in Article 3? I understand this is a lot to digest. I think the things that would be most helpful, as I said before, are definitions. There are certain terms in here that you think could become a gray area. Let us know, because we want to make sure we define it. And I think the same thing would apply as Dave and Melissa and myself and others have talked about adding a lot more graphics to the ordinance. None of them are inserted yet. But if you feel that there are sections within this, I know we're not really to the part that you would need those yet, but feel something is maybe slightly confusing where a graphic would help, let us know, and we can do our best to come up with a graphic that might better illustrate what it's trying to say. I guess I'll move on then to Article 4, district regulation. So this is quite a bit of a difference from the previous ordinance, in the sense that previous ordinance had different articles for each zone, and it talked about what were allowed in each zoning category. What we're trying to do is create a larger table. So it's kind of a one-stop shop. You find the use that you're looking for, and the table will tell you where you can use it and where you cannot use it, where you need a special land use and where it's permitted use. Does anybody have any comments, especially with regards to the schedule, the chart?
Josh, you, the chair, through the chair. The initials P, which stands for permitted, SLU, but I guess just for the sake of putting it in after maybe section 4.04, paragraph B, under 1, 2, and 3, do you think it would be advisable maybe to insert acronyms or those initials after, where it says permitted use, accessory uses and buildings, the appropriate acronym for that, and then SLU after special land use?
Thing that I would comment on, this might be something to look at between the definition of special land use and how it's described here. Under definitions, I think this is how we have it existing. The wording is parts of land or an activity which under usual circumstances would be detrimental to other permitted uses. Whereas with this, it's more of a way it's worded in definitions, it basically implies that in all cases, special land uses are assumed to be detrimental, but we might allow them under certain circumstances, which I don't think is necessarily how we use them in practice, and it's also not necessarily reflected in the wording here. It's more of a allowable with extra oversight, I guess.
So you would use the word may be permitted.
Or, yeah, could or may.
Yeah.
Something. Or, well, it's in the definitions, it says would be detrimental. So it is, it's an all-inclusive term as opposed to maybe detrimental.
Got it.
Yeah.
Hey, quick, Josh, on page 7, schedule land use. Public stables, riding academies, hunt clubs and kennels. Page 3. So if we had somebody that had a farm and already had stables and stuff, and people rode there, would they need a special land use to continue?
Not if it's already existing, no.
If it's existing, but if somebody come in and wanted to set up something like that on land, like 20 acres of land,
Correct.
they would need special land. Okay. Thanks.
Another thing I saw in here that might be a definition thing, and I noticed it, I think within residential, again, this time back to having read through the definitions, is the distinction between ancillary and accessory when it comes to structures. And I noticed that we have ancillary dwelling in here. And when I was reading through there, the difference between ancillary and accessory use, the different wording I found.
You gotta look at that right now, the original TNB for ancillary. So we was trying to figure out how to best align the two together. It's almost
Yep. C&D in the definitions literally threw me off, I think 5 pages. I was like, why do we have these two here?
No, we run into that, and we gotta kind of think about the best way to handle it. So.
Made sense once I realized what it was.
Us a little bit too.
All the comments here, but I know we have stuff in the definitions of massage parlors versus massage treatments. We have massage business in here. C4. Massage treatment accessory to a professional medical lunch. Have good definitions on that one. What distinguishes the two? My memory is that massage does mix the two together quite a bit. As part of a medical office versus a
chiropractor or something like that.
Chiropractor. I guess I'll add that when we get to beyond the chart, once we get into like 4.07, there are lots of places where we're intending to start adding some graphics that can show how we measure the width and depth of lots, things like that. So if you see that there, you feel a graphic would be helpful, please let us know.
Possible to do a graphic for I-shaped lots on a your lot line is.
Certainly graphics after a paragraph 4.07A. Particularly when you get down to after sub paragraph 4.07A, beginning with 4. And probably through the rest of that, either, the appropriate number of diagrams, with arrows and stuff like that, that
Yes.
would be very easy to read and follow.
Any other comments on section 4?
There is some distinction, and this actually reminded me of PA stuff we have and possibly have coming up. The difference between structure and building, particularly where they go into setbacks. When I was reading, I think the structure definition had something to the effect of structure is a structure with a roof that is held up by structural vertical members. We perhaps looked at the difference between a structure versus a building. They're used a little bit differently here. I noticed even within, even on page 12 here, I was just noticing that it talks about a structure not being in a setback, and it's distinguished between a building, which it refers to elsewhere. Not sure which paragraph I'm in. It's on page 11. So number 5 is no structure of any sort shall be constructed in a recorded each. Whereas elsewhere within there, it's referring to buildings, decks, and patios, pools, and things of that nature.
Thanks.
So on page of paragraph 4, F, subparagraph 2. And Josh, or maybe even Dave or Melissa, you can both all comment on this. What was used in the determination of patios and decks being at least 20 feet from the rear lot line? Is it kind of standard in other communities, or is it features with this township? And you might have some lots that could back up to water. I mean, just curious.
This was a dimension this house, so it had.
Oh, okay.
You tend to follow some of the dimensions. But you have to be careful. You have to be very careful with the balancing point. What point 300 non-conforming. Because someone can't do anything if you change the dimension. That's over you need to go back and look at something, that's why this is the first step only, but you can get yourself into, back yourself into a corner at some point if you are painting too many dimensions, so 20 feet, I believe. Been in there all along.
Yeah, I think that's been in there for a long time.
I think it's been a long
Okay, so for the purposes of this very first preliminary draft, I guess the history is from previous zoning ordinances.
Yeah, for those draft, yes.
Okay.
And we can look at changing if the commission feels like we can alter. Since it's all drafted. Current ordinance, we have to look at that.
Okay,
There are ways, there are methods to do it. Yeah, I know everything is all from legal non-conforming manual, and if you want to change it, legal non-conforming is going to be changed. Or then that means they can be maintained as is, they just can't be enlarged. At that point, you start striking.
okay.
All right, I'm gonna move on to Article 8. The plan requirements and procedures.
You want a Zoom call?
Huh?
You want a Zoom call?
Box on 808.02 A, or pardon me, B, building design. Do you currently have any standards that we enforce that with? They'll relate to the surrounding environment in regard to texture, scale, mass, proportion, and color. High standards of construction and quality materials will be incorporated into the development.
Yeah, I don't think that we have a standard that we compare that to, and that's one we already identified earlier this week that we're gonna take a look at, may not need,
You
or may not need to be in there at all.
either not there or more things.
As high standards, to one person is not gonna be the same as
There's
high standards to another.
a lot of definitions for that one. About C3, where it refers to the planning commission determining that there might be an excessive number of curb cuts in relation to abutting roads.
You're going right down our list. I have that underlined and with a note to say define excessive.
Okay. And can we even do that with regards to public roads?
Really the Department of Roads, which is going to determine where the
Or the Michigan Department of Transportation if it abuts a state road.
100%.
But on 8.03 A, for substantial change in class or use, do we have substantial, is that a substantial change in that regard defined? I know we've talked about that before with at least one parcel before site plan review, what constituted a substantial change there.
Which section were you? I'm sorry.
This is 8.03 A. Four, yes, I believe it is A4. So it says a site plan shall be submitted for review and approval by the planning commission whenever one or more of the following conditions apply. when there's a building permit, new or additional parking or a new establishment for all special land use. It says for any substantial change in use or class use referred by the zoning administrator. Designee, or however that word. Designee vocabulary.
Another thing I will point out in 8.04. One talked about that by a licensed or registered architect, landscape architect, land surveyor, professional engineer. We're going to add in the state of Michigan to that. It is referenced in other places in the ordinance, but it should say that there as well.
That's easy.
I assume that architectural licenses are not very reciprocal.
The other states,
Yeah.
I do not know.
Okay. I know builders licenses typically aren't.
Not all states recognize depending.
Would that follow through with like engineering plans or anything like that?
Yeah, it refers to state of Michigan and other places referring to engineering plans in our ordinance. We just want to make sure it's carried through everywhere,
Okay,
that it requires a licensed or registered, architect, surveyor, engineer, that it be licensed in Michigan.
This is for the site plan specifically.
Thank you for the question. He can come for you, like man. Okay. You could be in front of you to be done with this. Some things have. More. I know how long your agendas can get. Many of my other communities are looking to do a lot more, the ordinance standards in place. They're doing a lot more administrative in terms of reviews to expedite things. But I don't know, maybe, but it's kind of a value question. We have to ask every planning commission to see how far they want the administration to take. I don't think specifically it comes up that you can call. I hear every meeting, I'm not quite sure.
I don't think I'm not bogged down by anything extra on our agenda. I think you guys have cleaned that up.
We used to have a lot more sign approvals, for example.
Yeah, sign approvals, that they used to drag us down.
Similar to that is probably site or plan extensions. We really only talk about plan extensions 1 out of every 30 times.
Yeah,
Can you give us some examples of what the other communities are doing as far as?
More technical issue up here because of technical in housing. This place is pretty good. Some places they dealt with, boy, every time a fence changed or something changed, they were bringing it back to the commission. It was really, it's like, it's not on my other commission. This one, absorb and get streamlined, be pretty good. A lot of other places, hold things off and they debate it and drag them back for 6 months at a time. And it's
Commissions
really
do that?
rough. It's a over a fence or a landscape matter or something that really doesn't affect health, safety, or welfare of anybody.
I think,
You okay, guys, ignore it, to maybe we're missing along the way.
no, I would agree that the changes that were made to technical change requirements were for the better. Because as proposed in this draft ordinance, I'm sure, several eyes are going to be reviewing it many more times and something might pick, but I think the way, at least it's preliminary presented at right now is fine. An improvement.
Not everything, but it's being about
Then I'm assuming that we don't think that the 8.05D, which just says revisions and or amendments to the site plan must be submitted to the commission, does not conflict with the technical change portion. This obviously, it does not stipulate any, it just says revisions or amendments, which a technical change would still be a revision, even if it is a minor revision. I assume we want to exclude technical changes in that case. So I didn't realize we can require a cash deposit certified check or letter of credit as part of the planning commission approval of the site plan.
That's,
Do we want to, do we want to let the planning commission?
that's part of what we're changing.
Okay,
That's part of what was changed previously and it got carried over into this. Where I said,
it's against ourselves, but
Lots of conflicting stuff in here, so.
We don't need that.
Section 8.05E. Site plan approved 2 years. It looks like unless if no activity has happened during time, the site plan can be requested to be extended. But it looks like you're leaving to the planning commission or the planning department discretion as to how long the extension would be, as opposed, let's say, to a 1-year extension or 2 years or something like that.
We're proposing a change to make that a 1-year extension.
Okay, so that would be added in
Yeah,
paragraph.
yes.
Okay.
And the clock would start when we receive the application. So if, I think right now it says that it expires if the planning commission hasn't taken action. If the applicant gets their application in before the deadline, and it just has to go through the process, they're still okay, assuming the planning commission grants the extension of time.
What about extent the planning commission grants an approval, but with conditions? And there's a lapse of time before the conditions, let's say, are met and then resubmitted. Would time clock start with PC approval when the conditions are submitted? I guess it's just something to think about.
I guess I don't understand what conditions you're referring to. Is there an example?
I'm involved in my work during the day of a development where we were granted final site plan approval by a planning commission, but yet there were further conditions that the township engineering consultant, planning consultant, and the township attorney did not completely sign off on. Don't ask me why they granted at the time, but they did. It has taken us a few extra months to come back and to resubmit the conditions, which we've done. But in the interim, because of the change in the economy, let's say in residential development, interest rates, prices coming back with new construction and things like that, there's a doubt there may be an issue with, I guess I'm, to clarify, I'm sounding a little confusing here, but, to clarify, would the, I guess, clock start running on the date of this planning commission or a board approval, or when conditions are submitted?
I think the way we've handled it up to this point is that the clock starts running when it's approved by the approving, whether that's planning commission or the
Any question?
And we understand that certain permits you might need from other agencies are taking longer, which is why we changed it from 1 year to 2 years. But I think those are the types of things, that's why you get 2 years to commence. Yeah, I think that's our interpretation right now, is that the clock starts once. And those are the types of things that you may need to handle. That being said, there have been some developments that got approved on a certain date and then might have had to do a technical change, for example. Typically then on the date of the approval of the technical change starts over.
Clock and right, okay, that seems reasonable, plus the mechanism and the ability though to give the applicant the opportunity, the right to request a further extension. You said up to 1 year. I think that's reasonable.
And with regards to that extension, Chairman Hardy, I know you mentioned those coming before you. I guess I want to make sure I understand your comment there. Are you saying that you think that's something that does or does not need to continue coming before you?
Time extensions?
Yeah.
I think they should come before us.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
When
You know-
Mr. Skirdo asked about things that you feel maybe bogged down your agendas, he threw out their time extension. So I just wanted to clarify if he was suggesting that maybe that's an administrative task. I think come before you. Sounds like you're saying come before you.
And it's the multiple ones that are the ones that are problematic.
Others.
And they come back year after.
Year after year after year.
And really, in that sense, so if someone comes back year after year, your department really wouldn't have the authority to say, we're done with this. The body would have more authority.
The way it's structured right now, that's correct.
Yeah,
All we can do is tell you where they're at in the process. You know, we know of the projects that are actively pursuing permits, like just Spatafora was talking about. Sometimes it just takes, the site is so complicated, it takes a lot longer than maybe the 2 years to get through the entire process. But if somebody's sitting on the sideline and all they do is write us a letter every couple of years, you know, all we can report to you is this is where they're at. And then it's up to you to decide whether you want to grant that extension or not. And it also factors in if we've made a change to the ordinance that might affect our decision.
yeah.
And this is just to get a building permit. So it's not to complete the construction.
Right.
Yeah, they get another 2 years.
Right. And you'll be able to weigh whether or not the
They're just,
justified. I mean, Eagle right now is taking forever in their approvals, for instance, right? So, I mean, they may come back and say, listen, I've been waiting for this Eagle permit for a year. And then, you consider it at that time.
Yeah.
You'll be able to, they'll have to submit to you all their steps they've taken and the reasons for the delay.
right, but if we ask the question after the second application of an extension and the planning tells us there's been no activity on this development, then that might give us some latitude to say, look, you need to start all over. And when you're ready to go and develop, then come back and develop, you know.
Right.
Yes.
Thinking a little maybe outside the box, I don't know, Dave, if you've seen this in other communities, but is there any other ordinances maybe that you've seen, or maybe Josh, or anyone here, maybe where the first time extension is reviewed and approved administratively, and then after the first one, then if there are multiple ones, then it would come before the governing authority?
Okay. The administrative first extension, 1 year. After that, it has to go back to a CBA, go back to a planning commission after that first extension. But I've seen equal number go right back to PC, give the PC. What I've seen is not extension over extension. What I've also seen is PC has one extension for a year. After that, site plan is null and void, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
When you start over. I've seen that option also.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, to Mr. Spatafora's point, when Mr. Skuro mentioned that, I was trying to think of votes where we all vote unanimously every time without discussion. And on the first year extension, I can't think of a time we've denied one or really even ever had discussion. When we've had discussion, it's on year 3 or year 4. And I don't know if this would be appropriate thing, but to me, the first extension, like Josh has to come up here and say, these guys are not doing their job and it's horrible for me to ever do anything really but say yes the first year. It's always year 3 or year 4. So I don't know if it makes sense. And if the planning department would rather have it come before the planning commission, doesn't bother me to vote on them. I just know that we never have discussion on them. It's like the first
It goes through.
year, it's nothing, at which point, you know, if it can be done easier for the developer and for the department internally, I don't mind it. It's the later ones where it starts being 5 years where it's like, okay, guys, something's got to move or we got to, you know, revoke this.
The only problem we could run in was letting it be the first time they come in administratively doing it. Then the developer thinks that's how they're gonna do it going forward. And then that could get confusing too, to the developer. They could be saying, well, wait a second, you guys approved this before, why can't you approve it now? And that puts more load on
On the permit.
an overloaded situation now.
But wouldn't there, Charlie, be language though in the new ordinance if you're open to, let's say, a planning department or all the departments doing the site plan review for an extension, comment administratively and the reasons maybe why, but if it came before a second request, before the planning commission or governing authority, then
Well, if we put language in there that they had to agree it contractually somehow agree on, okay, this is fine. Administratively, we'll do it. The second one, you're signing that, it's going to the planning commission. This way, there's no confusion with the developer. They know, because all I see is a slowdown in economy, the developer coming in, and then our planning department being badgered because they did it before. Why can't they do it now? So I see where you're going. I have no problem with that. But we got to make sure it's done.
maybe I'm talking against myself, but I was thinking if they do an administrative review, that doesn't necessarily guarantee it's an automatic approval. I mean, there could be reasons administratively why they may want to deny it, especially if it's a very cheap reason or something like that. We just didn't get to it or so.
I think I understand possibly the first year extension being done administratively. And Mr. Olay can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure we would feel comfortable with administratively denying an extension. My thought would be we can approve it for 1 year. If we feel we don't want to approve it on that first year, it has to come here and you can deny it or approve it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't feel comfortable that we have the authority to deny it.
I think that would be good. That would be something worth considering. Administrative review, if it's approved, they continue the process, where hopefully they'll get final site plan by then.
From an administrative standpoint, where staff gets caught up. Sometimes things that we need should just be streamlined. There's other points where it has to be judge and jury. And it puts staff in a really.
That's what I'm worried
bad
about.
Position in judge and jury. It's not a full board up here. We're all talking together and so we can, not vetted correctly. So that's why some things are maybe we can think of some standards in there where we're allowed to do extensions if it's like variety kind of extensions done administratively. Someone has to lay concrete or someone has to put in landscaping and also you're getting November or December. And we granted an extension until spring to allow that stuff to be put in. That's the common administrative way of doing it. If someone's just plain not acting, then at some point it puts us in a bind saying, are they really doing this or not? Maybe we need a full board. So look at this to see if these guys are just dragging their feet or something. It makes me off direction at the end. So we go back, we got marching order, but now we're gonna act. I don't know if that's confusing or makes sense.
I'm concerned if we change it where it's administrative, then it puts all that pressure on you guys to decide if they are actually doing. You know, we'll get a report from our planning department. And out of the report, this board can make a decision. And in that system, you know,
Well,
the developer understands then.
and that is part of the value of the planning commission. I mean, as
Yeah.
much as we unfortunately sometimes act as a rubber stamp, realistically, we do. Part of the thing we can give is the planning department an escape valve where no, that's what the planning commission said, as it's.
Yep.
And then there's no pressure on the planning department to approve it administratively because the developer will complain to the administrator, well, you just approve it. If not, then you're gonna make me pay this fee and go through this
Right.
hearing. If everyone has to pay the fee and go through the hearing regardless, then everyone's in the same boat and then there's no accusation of playing favorites or abusing discretion. That's my suggestion, but
Well, and going back to the first point, I mean, as much as we may vote yes all the time, you know, a site plan extension takes up an average of 90 seconds on our agenda. Like, it's not like it's a,
Right.
I'm not saying that it's a lot of effort for us. It's just, yeah.
And you always give a report that tells us, for instance, if Eagles dragging their feet and it's still don't have the permits that they need, then there's a reason to say yes. You know, if your report says basically they have done nothing, I mean, you put it in a different phrasing, I'm sure, then that's our way of saying no.
Yes,
So,
correct.
you know, the discussion doesn't happen much with one extension because you do such a good job of telling us why they need that extension. So, but it's 2, 3, and 4 that are the ones.
I've got the state law on right now, reading it, so there's nothing in state statute that states you have to give 1 year extension, you have to give 2 years, nothing in there. It's based on how you feel, how you want to operate this township.
talk internally.
I think we should just leave it. Let them come in, let them procedurally do what they've been doing.
Yeah.
It might energize them too to keep it going because.
Yeah.
And then again, you guys are heavy enough with work. You don't need extra work. I don't think you do, but.
Everybody's smiling, Charlie. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
That means they're going golfing early.
I should know this, but I'm having a brain fog right now, but is there a fee for an application for a time extension right now?
There is because it's advertised,
Okay,
How much is it be?
I believe $250.
Okay, so it's not detrimental.
It covers the fee to put it in the newspaper as well as the fee to pay each one of you for every meeting you attend.
Yeah.
Things like that.
I agree with you.
Okay, anything else in Article 8? If not, I say we move to Article 9, special land use.
I guess this would be a question to Mr. Avoya on E1. Says the commission shall not approve an application for a special land use permit unless it has been established definitively that. Are we okay with definitively in there?
To do that. And I'm sure internally, we'll be looking at a lot of the definitive statements that are in here.
I'm sure that we define it.
But part of it too is we're looking at our form ordinance and seeing how we can improve it with this updated standard, and we're gonna vet all that internally.
definitely.
Guess I would add that, to Mr. Tuckfield's earlier point about a special land use, the way it was defined in definitions kind of inferred that just by the nature of it, special land uses are and essentially detrimental to the surrounding area or to the neighboring parcels. And then when we get in here,
To make sure it isn't.
doesn't make sure it isn't. So again, I think we need to cross-reference finding things with follow to get a special land use approved.
Because technically at that point, a special land use request may be. A land use, if approved properly, by definition, should not be detrimental to the surrounding area.
And I would assume everyone would be comfortable with 9.03 following the process we just established. Site plans. Extension would come back to the board, or to the commission, excuse me.
I think that would even be more sensitive than a site plan, really. One interesting thing in here as well,
Yes.
I'd ask you to comment on it, would be under, 9.02.4. Special land use permit shall remain unchanged, except for the mutual consent of the commission and the landowner. Interesting. Obviously, we can approve with conditions. Back and reapprove with different conditions, but I don't know if the consent of the landowner is.
We would just say by approval of the commission.
Hearing nothing else in Article 9.
Mhm.
Article 10, land unit development. Any thoughts or comments here?
Like the second sentence of B there, Josh. I'm not sure if we already had that in there. So the provisions of this article are not intended to be used to avoid the zoning requirements otherwise apply, but rather to allow flexibility in the strict application of zoning regulations that promote a mixture of uses and improve on the design, character, and quality of a new development. Not sure if we already had that, but past usages of I think from before you strictly abided by that particular concept.
Aaron, I'm sorry, where were you on that one?
That was the second sentence of B.
Okay, good.
Reasons of this. I know I mentioned it before, but we've had people try to put PUDs that were more or less a variance request before the planning commission.
One thing that I will also point out, 10.02. That language has changed a little bit and it's probably going to change a little bit again. Currently, the way we've been doing it is that the planning commission conducts the public hearing and makes a recommendation to the township board. Right now, this says that the public hearing. I don't think that's going to be the case. However, one thing that we do need to change in our process is, according to state law, the body that approves or denies is where the public hearing shall be held. So right now, we're actually not doing it appropriately.
Should be done at the board.
Well, the planning commission could be the final say, and that's where the public hearing would be held. And it wouldn't be a recommendation, you'd be the final say, or make a recommendation to the board. And then the board holds the public hearing and has the final say. So those two ways are how we're gonna have to go, but that has the way we've currently been doing it needs to change.
I will tell you that in other communities, the planning commission does the heavy work and the heavy load with the public hearing, extensively reviewing everything carefully, questioning the applicants. Whatever decision is made, detailed minutes for the township board as far as an itemized synopsis, not super long. It's not a narrative, but like in bullet format of what they did and why with the recommendation. And then the township board will approve with conditions or deny or something along those lines.
So just so I can understand that, Josh, too. So you can only have a public hearing if you're the approving body, or the approving body is required to have a public hearing?
Their approving body is required to have a public hearing. Are there any other definitions you're seeing in here that or items that need to be defined? I know we pointed out a few internally, but
And this is a question maybe, Josh, your experience, also Dave, Melissa, do you find other townships or other municipalities have like a 3-step process for PUD approval? I've seen some where they do it in 2 steps.
I've seen like 2 and 3 steps. I got some that do 3-step approval where you go through the concept plan, break ordinance, planning commission recommendation, council or council township board approval, and the details of the site plan then get reissued back to the planning commission. I've seen that a number of places, but I also seen that more places trying to go back more of a 2-step process now to make it less cumbersome.
I think the intent of the 3-step process, if you will, having the concept plan and then the general design plan before the site plan, is that the concept plan allows a potential development to come in and show you what they're thinking. And if it's a non-starter and you guys are not interested in it, it saves them time and money of doing a general design plan, which is much more costly and intensive as far as engineering goes.
Thank you.
Good point.
Look if you look at it. You're not sending a concept plan all the way through the board, you're taking care of it at the planning commission level without a public hearing. So in a way, you're getting a feel for it. Some places don't do that. Some places start with a concept and ordinance, they run it from the commission up to the board, get okay on that, before they circle it back to the planning commission. to get the site. You've got kind of a hybrid, which is we'll talk about it inside. Mr. Van Tippelen and Mr. Loya to see if there's anything in the past that's caused some glitches. We're not all 1 year to try and make it more easy to negotiate.
There's no other comments on Article 10. Those are the ones we wanted to cover tonight, to not get too far into this. I know there's, especially with general provision, there's lots of other changes that we're gonna be internally. They'll probably get an updated version of that before we come back and discuss some of that. So as far as the ordinance, I think that's where we want it to be this evening. I know some of you reviewed the whole thing, some of you reviewed sections that we didn't discuss tonight. We're more than happy to take your comments as soon as you have them. If you want to email them, if you have a copy, I'll be happy to scan it. Let us know. But we'll be looking to get back in front of you with a much better draft version of this in the near future. So.
In future meetings, will we be going over the other articles or just these?
Yes.
Okay. That it? Any comments, folks?
No, I think it's a good start.
I think it's a good start. Yeah, I do too. All right, we don't need to do a motion or anything because this is just a workshop. Yeah, workshop. All right, close the meeting. Public comments on non-agenda items. There is no one in the audience. Commissioners' comments? Anyone? Okay. And then the Macomb County Board of Trustees Liaison update, Mr. Charles Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy.
You're welcome, Mr. Oliver.
The big thing was, our Park and Rec director gave his board an update. Earlier, probably a year ago. So a budget of $1 million to spruce up the parks. And he just gave us an update on some of the stuff they've spent, the money they've spent and the things they've done. I just jotted them down. We put in at Walden Park, we put in a brand new swing set. And it sounds like, it's just a swing set, but when he was giving us the presentation on the screen, it was quite a swing set. So any of this stuff, I think all of our board members should go look at it. We did that. We updated the restrooms. And again, you would not think that was a big deal, but you know, they put LED lights in, new fixtures here and there, new doors. So that was another thing they did. The tables, has anyone been by Wallenberg Park where there was that round circle there? We bought these real nice picnic tables with these fixed umbrellas. Great for seating, great for people just to sit around. It was nice. What else did we do? Basketball court. So on corners here, we had it's kind of like a skating, cement, we've all seen it. So that got converted into a basketball court now, or getting converted. So that'll be a nice update. And that's kind of about it. But if you get a chance, it'd be nice, you got grandkids, to take them over there and look at it.
Were these, Charlie, the first kind of major upgrades with the
Yes.
budget that we've done?
Yeah. Yeah, and we haven't, we haven't done nothing to the parks and since we built them.
Okay.
So, we did a lot of corners and playscapes and stuff like that. And, at Waldenburg, so it's something you should go look and see where your tax dollars are going. And then, we hired a new firefighter. And we, brung in a part-time election coordinator for elections, and they passed full-time employees, so.
Oh.
That, Ed.
Oh.
Ed Carey.
Jerry,
Yeah, yeah. So that kind of worked good, so.
is that year long, permanent, part-time,
That's that's
seasonal or?
part-time. Just part-time, yeah. So, and that's about it.
Who was the election coordinator before, wasn't
Yeah,
He's also the election coordinator for
Yeah.
Wayne County too before he came.
it was a no-brainer.
He's got a lot of experience.
Lot of experience. Yeah.
He worked for Macomb County too. I worked with him briefly in
He
Macomb
started.
County too, yeah.
Started, yeah. Yeah, it's a good guy.
Just to go back to the Parks and Rec,
Yeah.
have they spent their entire $1 million?
no.
Is that still in the budget?
Still got money.
Left is
Yeah, there's still money.
still spending?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sal was running the numbers and I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna add them all up. And
No, that's not,
but there's still things we're
but
gonna,
they still have money left to
yep.
do some sprucing if needed.
In Pittsburgh Park,
That's my next question.
that,
It's out to bid right now.
good. So that's moving forward.
The design plan is out for bid or?
Yeah, that went out a couple weeks ago, I think. The bids are due at the end of the month and to award at the first meeting in November to the contractor. So I think the board meeting is the 16th of November. Take it.
And then they would probably break ground in the spring, correct?
And they might do some tree clearing, general clearing of the site over the winter, but yeah, they'll break ground in the winter when the weather conditions are ideal.
Okay, anything else?
That's it.
All right. DBA liaison, Mr. Tuckfield.
Already, I'd only mention that we've got a meeting on Thursday, items,
Okay,
besides that.
all right. Planning department items.
A couple items, first one being that following on Charlie's comments, Parks and Rec, we do have a Parks and Rec master plan that Carlisle Warman, Mr. Skirtle's company is working on. We should have a draft of that later this month. So that's moving along nicely. We hope to have that adopted by the end of the year. And the other thing is Garfield Road. We've had lots of discussions about Garfield being extended. The first segment of Garfield, 22 to 23 mile, is also out for bid. So hopefully that's coming soon.
Oh, awesome.
That's gonna be in the spring next year?
Yes, hopefully
Allegedly.
finish next year. We're on the next.
Right word.
All right.
I think they're supposed to do it 1-year increments. Was that the plan?
Yeah, that was the original idea. I think the way it's gonna work now, if we can work out some right of way issues north of 23, they'll probably do those 2 miles together, or at least bid them together. Because half of the road is there, so south of 24 mile, the road exists.
There's a half mile.
Some intersection,
Yeah, half mile there's.
there's some intersection.
What, 23 mile?
What's that?
That's the plan? 23 to 25 at once?
Yes,
So ideally, 2 years from now, they'll be wrapping up and Garfield Road will be connected.
Are they doing the intersection improvements at 24 though sooner?
no, we looked at that, but it was more efficient to do it with the rest of the project. Yeah, I mean, the idea is to get all of Garfield done or the vast majority of it done before they start working on the widening of Romeo Plank. So we've got a pressure relief for that traffic that's going to be
Thanks.
served by construction.
All right. And these articles that we're looking at for the zoning ordinances, we'll go through what, 2, 3 a meeting or just so I have an idea.
I don't know if we have an exact answer for that right now. I think we have a lot to review internally still. We wanted to get started. Maybe we got started a little bit prematurely going through it, but we wanted to get started, get it out in front of you. The next planning commission meeting likely will have multiple agenda items outside of this, so we may or may not do this at the next planning commission meeting. But beyond that, I would expect that, yes, we'll be doing something similar to this.
Okay, fair enough. All right, is that it, Mr. Box?
Yes.
Okay. Motion to adjourn,
I moved.
motion by Mr. Oliver, supported by Mr. Smith.
Oh,
I figured you were gonna do
I
it.
will.
Yeah, supported by Mrs. Smith. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay. It is adjourned. Look at his email.
And I talked to them.
Yeah, we should. Definitions like. I did.
I know. I started.
They have like 3 pages of notes and I read through all of them. Again, it's my fault for not reading.
Yeah, my fault.